Continuing on with our discussion of measures of the spread of data, now we are going to briefly touch on variance. This is not a big piece of what we cover, but I do need to mention it. So variance is simply the square of the standard deviation, and you can find the deviation represented as x minus x bar, where x is the value of the data and x bar is the sample mean. And then the sample variance is equal to the sum of the squares of the deviations divided by the difference of the sample size and 1. So if you want more information, you can go to section 2.7 of our textbook and get additional information on variance. Next, I'd like to talk about the benefits of graphing the data. So the standard deviation can sometimes seem a little unclear, and so the recommendation is that you graph it in your calculator to give you a better idea of what is happening with the data. So if we have a symmetrical distribution, that is, the data is distributed evenly on either side of the mean, then the standard deviation can be very helpful. But when we have skewed distributions, the standard deviation might not help us as much. And that's because each of the skewed distribution sides have different spreads. So if you have a skewed distribution, then the recommendation is that you need to look at the first quartile, median, third quartile, the minimum, and the max values. So again, because these numbers can be confusing, we suggest that you graph them, and we want you to graph them in a histogram or a box plot. Now we're going to talk about standard deviation of grouped frequency tables. So this is a specific scenario where we have grouped data and we don't know the individual data values, so that we can't describe it and analyze it with exactness. So we can't find the exact mean, median, or mode. But what we can do is we can determine the best estimate for the measures of center and the measures of spread. Let's take a look at an example from our text for a grouped frequency table and finding the mean and standard deviation. So here you'll see that we have the class listed over here and the frequency in this column. And what I want you to do with the class is we are going to find the median of this. So we're going to find the middle value of the class and use that to create our information here. So we are going to go to Stat, Edit, and we need to enter in this data. So if the first class is 0 to 2, then the middle is 1. 3 to 5, the median is 4. 6 to 8, it's 7, 10, 13, and 16. Now we'll go over to L2 and we will put in our frequencies. So 1, 6, 10, 7, 0, 2. Now that we have our data in, we are going to go back to Stat, over to Calc, and we want to select one variable stats. We'll hit Enter. So for one variable stats, we want them to use list 1, comma, list 2, and hit Enter. Now that we have our data, we can see that the mean is 7.5769, and we can see that the sample standard deviation is 3.50. The population standard deviation would be 3.43, and that is how you would determine the standard deviation of grouped frequency tables.